Close your eyes now and let me tell you about the oldest fear, the one that lives in every human heart, the terror that has haunted our species since before we were human at all. This is the story of why we fear the dark, why the absence of light triggers something deep and primal within us, why even now, in an age of electricity and artificial illumination, we still feel a shiver when the lights go out. It is a fear that shaped our evolution, determined where our ancestors could live and when they could move, drove the invention of fire and the building of shelters. And it is a fear that remains with us today, written into our very biology, impossible to fully overcome no matter how rational we believe ourselves to be. If you enjoy these sleep stories, take a moment to leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from tonight and what topic you would like me to cover next. And if this story helps you drift off while learning something profound about human history, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might enjoy it. Now, let me take you into the darkness to understand why it frightens us and what that fear reveals about who we really are. The fear of darkness is not learned. It is not taught by parents or absorbed from horror movies or created by a single frightening experience in childhood. It is innate, built into the human brain, present from birth. Infants who have never experienced anything frightening in the dark will still cry when the lights go out. Children who have never been told stories of monsters will still imagine them lurking in the shadows. This universality, this appearance of the fear in every culture and every generation, tells us that we are dealing with something fundamental, something written into the code of what it means to be human. The scientific name for fear of the dark is nyctophobia, from the Greek nyx meaning night. But this clinical term does not capture the experience, it does not capture the quickening of the heartbeat, the straining of the ears, the way the imagination populates the unseen spaces with threats. It does not capture the primal quality of the fear, the sense that something ancient is awakening within us when the light fades. To understand why we fear the dark, we must go back millions of years, to a time when our ancestors were small, vulnerable creatures in a world full of predators. We must understand what night meant to them, what dangers it held, what terrors hunted through the darkness while they huddled together hoping to survive until dawn. Your ancestors were not always the dominant species on Earth. For most of human evolution, they were prey. They were hunted by creatures faster, stronger, and better equipped for killing than they were. Lions and leopards, hyenas and wild dogs, crocodiles and pythons, all of these saw early humans as food. And many of these predators hunted at night. The night belongs to predators. This is as true today as it was millions of years ago. The great cats of Africa, the wolves of the northern forests, the owls and the snakes and the countless other hunters that stalk through the darkness, all of them are adapted for night hunting. They have eyes that gather scarce light, ears that detect the slightest sound, senses of smell that can track prey through total darkness. They are built for the night in ways that humans are not. Your ancestors were built for the day. Like most primates, they had eyes adapted for colour vision in bright light, not for seeing in darkness. They had ears that were adequate but not exceptional. They had noses that were poor compared to most other mammals. When the sun set, your ancestors became vulnerable in a way they were not during the day. Their primary sense, vision, was suddenly useless. Imagine what night was like for them. The sun sinks below the horizon and the world transforms. The familiar landscape of the day becomes alien, unknowable. The trees that provided fruit become dark masses that could hide anything. The grass that swayed gently in the breeze becomes a sea of potential ambush points. Every sound is magnified, every rustle a potential threat, every crack of a twig a possible approaching predator. And the predators were real. This was not paranoia. This was accurate threat assessment. Leopards dragged early humans from their sleeping sites. Lions attacked groups that wandered too far from safety. Hyenas, with their bone-crushing jaws and their eerie calls, scavenged the bodies of those who did not survive the night, and sometimes killed the living as well. The fossil record tells us this story in bone. Skulls of early hominins have been found with puncture marks that match the canine teeth of leopards. Bones show the gnaw marks of hyenas. Our ancestors were killed and eaten by nocturnal predators, and the survivors were those who feared the dark enough to take precautions against it. This is how evolution works. Those who feared the dark survived to reproduce. those who wandered carelessly into the night, who did not feel the appropriate terror at the fading light, were more likely to be killed before passing on their genes. Over millions of years, this selective pressure shaped the human brain, building in a fear response that activated automatically when light disappeared. The fear of darkness is not a bug in human psychology. It is a feature. It is an adaptation that kept our ancestors alive, a warning system that told them when they were vulnerable, a motivator that drove them to seek shelter and safety before the predators began their hunt. But the fear goes deeper than just predators. Darkness meant other dangers as well. In the dark, your ancestors could not find food. They could not identify the plants that were safe to eat or spot the fruits ripening on distant trees. Foraging, which occupied much of their day, was impossible at night. Any energy expended moving around in the dark was energy wasted, energy that could not be replenished until the sun rose again. In the dark, your ancestors could not navigate. Without landmarks visible, without the sun to orient by, they could become lost. And being lost meant being separated from the group, from the safety of numbers, from the collective vigilance that was their best defense against predators. A human alone in the African night was a human unlikely to see morning. In the dark, your ancestors could not see hazards. The cliff edge, the snake coiled on the path, the river that could sweep them away, all of these became invisible dangers. Moving at night meant risking injury from 1,000 unseen threats. An injury in the prehistoric world often meant death. So the darkness was genuinely dangerous, and the fear of it was genuinely adaptive. But here is the remarkable thing. The fear outlasted the danger. Humans eventually conquered the night. We discovered fire, which pushed back the darkness and kept predators at bay. We built shelters, which protected us while we slept. We invented artificial light, which banished the night entirely from our homes and streets, and yet we still fear the dark. This is because evolution works slowly. The environments that shaped our brains have been gone for thousands of years, but our brains have not yet caught up. We still carry the psychology of the African savanna, the fear responses calibrated for a world of leopards and lions, even though most of us will never encounter such predators. Our brains are ancient, even though our world is modern. This mismatch between our evolved psychology and our current environment is one of the most important facts about the human condition. We are Stone Age minds living in a Space Age world. We fear things that are no longer dangerous and fail to fear things that are. We respond to the modern world with reactions designed for a very different one. The fear of darkness is a perfect example of this mismatch. In a world of electric lights and locked doors, darkness poses little threat to most people. The predators are gone, the hazards are managed, the night has been tamed, and yet the fear remains, triggered by the same stimuli that triggered it in our ancestors, producing the same responses that helped them survive. When you turn off the lights and feel a flicker of unease, you're experiencing the echo of 1,000,000 years of evolution. Your brain is responding as if you were still on the savanna, still surrounded by predators, still vulnerable to the terrors of the night. The fear is outdated, but it is real. It is written into your neurology, and it will be part of the human experience for as long as humans exist. Let me now take you deeper into the biology of this fear, into the brain structures and chemical cascades that produce the experience of terror in the dark. The fear response begins in a small almond-shaped structure, deep in the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is the brain's alarm system, constantly monitoring incoming sensory information for signs of threat. When it detects something potentially dangerous, it triggers a cascade of responses designed to prepare the body for action. The amygdala does not wait for conscious thought. It acts faster than consciousness, faster than the parts of the brain that analyze and reason. When the lights go out, the amygdala registers the change before you're even aware of it. It begins preparing your body for danger before you have had time to think about whether danger is actually present. This speed is adaptive. When facing a predator, milliseconds matter. The individual who pauses to consciously analyze the situation is the individual who gets eaten. The amygdala evolved to act first and ask questions later, to trigger the fear response at the slightest hint of danger, because the cost of a false alarm is much lower than the cost of failing to respond to a real threat. When the amygdala detects potential danger, it sends signals to other parts of the brain and body. The hypothalamus, a small region at the base of the brain, activates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response. Adrenaline floods the bloodstream. Heart rate increases, breathing quickens, muscles tense. Blood is diverted from the digestive system to the muscles, preparing for action. Pupils dilate, trying to gather as much light as possible. This last response is particularly relevant to fear of the dark. When you are frightened in darkness, your pupils dilate to their maximum extent, trying desperately to see something, anything, that might tell you whether the danger is real. This is why people look terrified in the dark with wide, staring eyes. Their brains are doing everything possible to restore the sense that darkness has taken away. But the pupils cannot overcome true darkness. There is a limit to how much light gathering is possible, and in deep darkness, even maximally dilated pupils cannot see. The brain knows this, and the knowledge contributes to the fear. The fear of darkness is partly a fear of blindness, of being unable to see threats that might be present, of being reduced to the inferior senses of hearing and smell. The amygdala also activates the brain's memory systems, searching for past experiences that might be relevant to the current threat. Have you been in this situation before? What happened? What did you do? This memory search is adaptive, helping you draw on past experience to guide current behavior, but it also contributes to the fear, because any negative memories associated with darkness are activated, making them vivid and present. For many people, the fear of darkness is connected to specific memories: a childhood experience of being lost in the dark, a scary movie watched too young, a story told by an older sibling designed to frighten. These memories become associated with darkness, and when darkness returns, the memories return with it, amplifying the fear. But even people without specific frightening memories still fear the dark. This suggests that the fear is not solely learned, but has an innate component, a built-in predisposition that exists before any learning takes place. The brain comes pre-wired to fear darkness, and experience then adds to or subtracts from this baseline fear. The neuroscience of fear also involves chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. When the amygdala is activated, it triggers the release of norepinephrine, which increases alertness and arousal. It triggers the release of cortisol, the stress hormone, which mobilizes energy reserves and suppresses non-essential functions. It may also affect serotonin levels, which can influence mood and anxiety. These chemical changes are why fear feels the way it does. The racing heart, the sweaty palms, the sense of hyper-alertness, all of these are the subjective experience of neurochemistry in action. When you feel fear in the dark, you are feeling your brain preparing your body for action, for fight or flight, for survival. The fear response also affects cognition, the way you think. When afraid, people tend toward hypervigilance, paying close attention to any stimulus that might indicate danger. They tend toward negative interpretation, assuming the worst about ambiguous situations. They tend toward memory bias, recalling threatening information more easily than non-threatening information. All of these cognitive changes are present in fear of the dark. In darkness, you become hypervigilant, straining to hear every sound, alert to every sensation. You interpret ambiguous stimuli negatively, assuming that the creak was a footstep, that the shadow was a figure, that the silence was something holding its breath. You remember frightening things, stories of what happens in the dark, images from horror movies, accounts of crimes committed under cover of night. This cognitive component of fear is partly why the fear of darkness is so hard to overcome through rational thought. You can tell yourself that there is nothing to fear, that you're safe, that the darkness is empty. But the fear operates below the level of conscious thought, in brain systems that do not respond well to rational argument. The amygdala does not speak the language of logic. It speaks the language of stimulus and response, of ancient dangers and automatic reactions. The night continues around you now, and perhaps you can feel some of what I am describing. Perhaps there is a small part of you that is alert to the darkness, that is listening for sounds, that is ready to respond if danger appears. This is normal. This is human. This is the inheritance of millions of years of evolution, the fear that kept your ancestors alive long enough to become ancestors. Let me now explore what happened at night on the prehistoric savanna, what your ancestors actually experienced when the sun went down and the darkness rose. The African savanna at night was a symphony of terror. As the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in reds and oranges before fading to black, the world transformed. The daytime creatures retreated to their sleeping places, and the nocturnal hunters emerged to begin their work. Your ancestors would have heard them. The roar of a lion, that deep resonant sound that can carry for miles, announcing dominance and searching for competitors or mates. The eerie whooping call of hyenas, communicating with each other across the darkness, coordinating their hunts. The coughing grunt of a leopard, that solitary killer that specialized in ambush, that could climb trees and drag prey larger than itself into the branches. These sounds were not abstract threats. They were immediate, present dangers. A lion's roar meant a lion was near, perhaps close enough to attack. A hyena's call meant the pack was hunting, and a group of early humans might well be on the menu. A leopard's grunt meant one of the most efficient predators in Africa was somewhere in the darkness, invisible, patient, deadly. Your ancestors could not see these predators. That was the terrible thing. During the day, they could spot a lion at a distance, could monitor its movements, could prepare to flee or defend themselves. But at night, the predators were invisible. They could be anywhere. They could be approaching right now, their padded feet silent on the ground, their eyes gathering the faint starlight that human eyes could not use. This uncertainty is a crucial component of the fear of darkness. It is not just that danger might be present. It is that you cannot know whether danger is present. The darkness hides information, and the lack of information is itself frightening. The human brain abhors uncertainty, especially about threats. It would rather know that a predator is present than not know whether one is. The sounds of the African night were not all predators. There were also the sounds of prey, the animals that the early humans might themselves have hunted during the day. Zebras and wildebeest, elephants and giraffes, antelope and buffalo, all of them moved and called in the darkness. But even these sounds were double-edged. If prey was alarmed, it meant a predator was near. If prey was fleeing, it meant something was hunting. The sounds of other animals provided information, but often that information was itself frightening. And then there were the sounds that could not be identified. A rustle in the grass, too small to be a lion, but what was it? A crack of a branch. Something moving through the trees, but what? A splash from the waterhole. Something there, but friendly or deadly. In the darkness, sounds became mysteries, and the human imagination, that powerful tool for prediction and planning, became a liability, populating the unknown with the worst possibilities. Your ancestors developed strategies for surviving the night. The most important was simply staying put. When darkness fell, they stopped moving. They found a safe place, ideally one that offered some protection from predators, and they stayed there until dawn. This might have been a rocky outcrop, defensible from approach. It might have been a grove of thorny trees which could be used as a barrier. In later eras, it might have been a cave with the opening facing away from the prevailing wind and narrow enough to defend. Staying in one place was crucial because moving at night was incredibly dangerous. Without vision to guide them, early humans could not see where they were going. They could stumble into predators, fall off cliffs, walk into rivers, encounter venomous snakes, or simply become lost. The only sensible strategy was to stop moving and wait for light. This behavioral pattern, activity during the day and rest at night, is called diurnal behavior, and it is fundamental to human nature. We are diurnal creatures, adapted for daylight, and this is reflected in everything from our biology to our psychology. Our circadian rhythms, the internal clocks that regulate our sleep and wakefulness, are tuned to the cycle of light and dark. Our hormones, our body temperature, our alertness, all of these follow predictable daily patterns shaped by millions of years of diurnal living. The fear of darkness is part of this diurnal adaptation. It is the psychological complement to the behavioral pattern. We stop moving at night because we fear what the night contains. The fear drives the behavior, and the behavior, by keeping us safe, reinforces the adaptive value of the fear. Fire changed everything, and we will explore that soon. But for millions of years before fire, your ancestors faced the darkness without protection, without light, with only their numbers and their fear to keep them alive. They huddled together. This was another crucial survival strategy. A single human in the African night was almost certainly doomed. But a group of humans pressed close together had a chance. Predators are cautious. They do not like to attack groups because groups can fight back, can injure them, can make hunting too costly. A group of early humans, even without weapons, was a more formidable target than a single individual. The huddling served multiple purposes. It provided warmth, as body heat was shared among the group. It provided protection, as more eyes and ears could detect approaching danger. It provided psychological comfort as the presence of others reduced the terror of the night. And it provided a defensive formation, a cluster of bodies that would be difficult for a predator to pick off. Imagine what this was like. A group of 20 or 30 early humans pressed together on a rocky outcrop as the sun sets. As darkness falls, they move closer, bodies touching, breath mingling. Every sound from the surrounding darkness triggers alertness, heads turning toward the source, eyes straining uselessly to see. A lion roars in the distance, and the group presses closer still, the sound triggering a primal fear that needs no learning. They do not sleep well, these ancestors of yours. Sleep is dangerous because sleep means lowered vigilance, and lowered vigilance means vulnerability. Some of them stay awake, watching and listening, while others rest fitfully. They take turns, perhaps, though without conscious planning, simply following the rhythms of fatigue and alertness that cycle through the group. Some of them do not make it through the night. On some nights, a predator approaches, emboldened by hunger or attracted by the scent of humans. On some nights, the predator attacks, rushing into the group with speed and violence, seizing one individual, dragging them away into the darkness as the others scream and flee. The victim's cries echo through the night, then fall silent. The survivors huddle together again, hearts pounding, listening for the predator's return, waiting for dawn. This was reality for your ancestors. Not every night, of course. Many nights passed without incident. But enough nights ended in death that the fear was constantly reinforced, constantly selected for, constantly shaping the psychology of the species. To fear the dark was to survive. To fail to fear it was to become a meal. The children were the most vulnerable. Small and weak, unable to defend themselves, they were easy targets for predators. Mothers would have held their infants close throughout the night, alert to any threat, ready to flee or fight. The cries of a child in the darkness would have been dangerous, potentially attracting predators, so silence was essential. The children who survived were those whose mothers kept them quiet and close. This is why children fear the dark more intensely than adults. They are programmed to fear it because for millions of years, children who feared the dark were more likely to stay close to their mothers, to remain silent, to avoid the behaviors that attracted predators. The fear of darkness in children is not a flaw to be corrected. It is an adaptation to be respected, the residue of an environment where children alone in the darkness did not survive. The old and the injured were also vulnerable. Those who could not keep up with the group, who could not move to safe sleeping sites, who could not huddle effectively with the others, were at greater risk. Natural selection was harsh, and the darkness was one of its instruments. Those who could not survive the night did not pass on their genes. Let me now talk about what the darkness does to the human mind, the psychological effects that compound the physical dangers. In darkness, humans experience a phenomenon called sensory deprivation. Vision, which provides the majority of our information about the world, is suddenly unavailable. The brain, starved of visual input, begins to compensate in ways that can be disturbing. Other senses become heightened. In the dark, you hear better, not because your ears have changed, but because your brain is allocating more processing power to auditory information. Sounds that you would normally ignore become salient, significant, potentially meaningful. The creak of a house settling, the rustle of leaves outside, the distant sound of traffic, all of these become more noticeable, more attention-grabbing, more potentially threatening. This heightened hearing is adaptive. When you cannot see, you must rely on other senses, and hearing is the most useful alternative. Your ancestors who paid attention to sounds in the darkness were more likely to detect approaching predators than those who did not. But in the modern world, where the sounds are usually harmless, this heightened attention can feed anxiety, making every noise a potential threat. The brain also begins to hallucinate. This is not psychosis, it is a normal response to sensory deprivation. When the brain does not receive expected visual input, it sometimes generates its own, creating images that are not there. In the darkness, you might see shapes, movements, figures that exist only in your mind. These hallucinations are the brain's attempt to fill in the missing information, but they often take frightening forms. Why would the brain hallucinate threats rather than neutral or pleasant images? Because the cost of missing a real threat is much higher than the cost of imagining a false one. If you hallucinate a predator and there is none, you have lost nothing but a moment of calm. If you fail to detect a real predator, you may lose your life. The brain is calibrated for survival, not for accuracy, and this means it errs on the side of seeing danger even when none is present. This is why children see monsters in the dark. They are not being foolish or childish. They are experiencing normal human perception under conditions of sensory deprivation. Their brains are doing exactly what brains evolved to do, filling in missing information with potential threats, ensuring that if something is there, it will be detected, even at the cost of many false alarms. Adults see things in the dark too, though they are often better at suppressing or reinterpreting these experiences. The fleeting shape in the corner of your vision, the sense that someone is there, the feeling of being watched, these are all manifestations of the brain's response to darkness. We explain them away, rationalize them, but they are real experiences, produced by real brain processes, evolved in response to real dangers. The darkness also affects mood. Without light, the brain produces less serotonin, the neurotransmitter associated with well-being and happiness. It produces more melatonin, the hormone that promotes sleep but that can also contribute to feelings of depression when present during waking hours. The darkness literally changes the chemistry of your brain, shifting it towards states of lowered mood and increased anxiety. This connection between darkness and mood is the basis for seasonal affective disorder, the depression that affects some people during the short dark days of winter. It is also part of why the fear of darkness feels so unpleasant, so emotionally heavy. The darkness is not just visually empty, it is emotionally oppressive, changing brain chemistry in ways that feel bad. The imagination becomes more active in the dark. Without visual information to constrain it, the mind ranges freely, generating scenarios, possibilities, threats. You think about what might be out there, what could happen, what dangers might be approaching. This imaginative activity is the brain trying to predict and prepare, but it can also spiral into rumination and catastrophizing, generating frightening scenarios that feed the fear. Your ancestors used this imaginative capacity to survive. By imagining possible threats, they could prepare for them, could develop plans, could be ready if the worst happened. But in the darkness of a modern bedroom, with no real threats present, the imagination becomes an enemy, generating fears that have no basis in reality, but that feel real nonetheless. Let me tell you about the evolution of night vision, about why humans see so poorly in the dark compared to other animals. Vision depends on light. The eye is essentially a device for capturing photons and converting them into neural signals that the brain can interpret. The more photons the eye can capture, the better it can see. In bright light, there are many photons and vision is easy. In dim light, there are fewer photons and vision becomes difficult. In true darkness, there are almost no photons and vision becomes impossible. Different animals have evolved different solutions to the challenge of seeing in low light. Some, like cats and owls, have eyes with a reflective layer called the tapetum lucidum that bounces light back through the retina, effectively doubling the chance that each photon will be detected. This is why cats' eyes glow in the dark when light shines on them. They are reflecting the light back out after it has passed through the eye twice. Humans do not have a tapetum lucidum. We are descendants of diurnal primates, animals that were active during the day and rested at night. There was no selective pressure to develop good night vision because our ancestors were not supposed to be active at night. Instead, they were supposed to be huddled safely in sleeping sites waiting for dawn. Other adaptations for night vision include larger eyes, which can gather more light, and a higher proportion of rod cells in the retina, which are more sensitive to light than cone cells but do not provide colour vision. Nocturnal animals tend to have these features. Humans have relatively small eyes and retinas dominated by cone cells, adaptations for detailed colour vision in daylight rather than sensitivity in darkness. The result is that humans are essentially blind in the dark. Where a cat or an owl can see clearly on a moonless night, a human can see almost nothing. Our eyes simply cannot gather enough photons to form an image. We are reduced to other senses, to hearing and touch and smell, senses that are functional but not nearly as useful as vision for detecting threats. This poor night vision is part of why we fear the dark. The fear is a response to genuine vulnerability. In the dark, we cannot see what is there, and what we cannot see can kill us. The fear is a recognition of this vulnerability, a warning that we are operating outside our adapted environment, that we are at risk in ways we are not during the day. Some humans have slightly better night vision than others due to genetic variation in the structure of the eye and retina. But even the best human night vision is poor compared to true nocturnal animals. We are a diurnal species, and the night is not our domain. Then fire came, and everything changed. No one knows exactly when humans first controlled fire. The evidence is fragmentary, debated, interpreted differently by different scientists. But at some point, perhaps 1,000,000 years ago, perhaps more recently, our ancestors learned to use fire, and the night was never the same. Fire provided light. For the first time, humans could see in the darkness. The circle of firelight pushed back the night, creating an island of visibility in the ocean of black. Within that circle, humans could see each other, could see approaching dangers, could use their primary sense even after the sun had set. Fire provided warmth. The African nights could be cold, especially at higher elevations or during certain seasons. Fire allowed humans to survive in places and times that would otherwise have been too cold for a hairless ape. It extended the range of human habitation, opening up new territories that were previously uninhabitable. Fire provided protection. Predators fear fire. They do not understand it, and they avoid it instinctively. A fire at the entrance of a camp created a barrier that most predators would not cross. For the first time, humans had a defense against the nocturnal hunters, a way to keep the lions and leopards and hyenas at bay. Fire provided a social focus. The circle of firelight became the center of social life, a place where humans gathered, talked, shared food, told stories. The fire created a boundary between the human world and the wild world, between the safe and the dangerous, between us and them. Around the fire, humans could be human, could engage in the social behaviors that define our species. The conquest of fire was the first great victory over the darkness, but it was only partial. The fire could only illuminate a small area. Beyond its light, the darkness remained, vast and threatening, filled with unknown dangers. The fire pushed back the night but did not eliminate it. The fear remained because the darkness remained just beyond the reach of the flames, and fire was unreliable. It could go out. Wind, rain, lack of fuel, all of these could extinguish the fire and plunge the group back into darkness. The night a fire went out must have been a night of terror, a sudden return to the vulnerability that the fire had temporarily lifted. Keeping the fire going became a crucial task, a responsibility that could mean life or death for the group. Fire also had dangers of its own. It could burn, causing painful injuries that could become infected and kill. It could spread, becoming uncontrollable, destroying shelters and trapping people. It required fuel, which had to be gathered and stored. It required attention, constant vigilance to keep it burning at the right level. Fire was a tool, but a demanding one, requiring effort and skill to use effectively. Despite these limitations, fire transformed the human relationship with darkness. Before fire, darkness was absolute, uncontestable, an environment where humans were helpless prey. After fire, darkness was defeatable, at least partially, an environment that could be modified and managed. The fear of darkness shifted from a fear of something inevitable to a fear of something that could be fought. This shift is important psychologically. A fear of something you cannot escape is a different experience from a fear of something you can protect against. The first is despair. The second is manageable anxiety. Fire gave humans agency in the face of darkness, the ability to do something, to take action, to improve their situation. This agency reduced the psychological impact of the fear, even if it did not eliminate the fear itself. Let me now move forward in time to the development of permanent shelter, another great victory over the darkness. For most of human evolution, our ancestors were nomadic, moving from place to place following food sources, never staying long in any one location. Their shelters were temporary, constructed quickly from available materials and abandoned when the group moved on. These shelters provided some protection from rain and wind, but they were not secure against determined predators. But at some point humans began to build more permanent structures. This happened at different times in different places, but the general pattern was the same. Humans settled down, built durable shelters, and began to stay in one place for extended periods. This transition, from nomadic to sedentary life, was one of the most important changes in human history. Permanent shelters changed the experience of night. A solid structure, with walls and a roof, with a door that could be closed and secured, was a refuge from the darkness in a way that a temporary camp could never be. Inside the shelter, the darkness outside became irrelevant. Predators could not enter. The unknown could not approach. The shelter created a boundary between the human world and the wild world, a boundary that held through the night. This boundary is psychological as well as physical. Inside the shelter, humans felt safe in a way they could not feel outside. The walls became a symbol of protection, the closed door a barrier against fear. Even today, when most of us live in houses and apartments that no predator could threaten, we feel safer inside than outside, especially at night. The shelter satisfies something deep in the human psyche, a need for enclosure, for boundaries, for a defended space. The development of shelter also changed the social structure of nighttime. In a shelter, families could sleep separately from the larger group, creating private spaces that did not exist before. Parents could protect their children in enclosed spaces, reducing the need for constant group vigilance. Sleep became deeper, more restful, as the shelter took over some of the protective functions that vigilance had previously provided. But the shelter did not eliminate the fear of darkness. Outside the shelter, the darkness remained. The shelter was a refuge from the darkness, but it was also a reminder that the darkness was there, just outside the walls, just beyond the door. To leave the shelter at night was to enter the darkness, to become vulnerable again, to face the ancient fears. This is why so many horror stories involve violations of the shelter. The monster that breaks through the walls, the intruder who enters through the window, the thing that is somehow already inside when you thought you were safe. These stories tap into the deep fear that our shelters are not truly secure, that the darkness can reach us even in our protected spaces. The shelter keeps the darkness out, but the fear that it might fail is itself a source of fear. Let me now talk about the darkness inside, about the psychological dimensions of the fear that go beyond physical threats. Darkness is not just an absence of light, it is also a symbol, a metaphor, a carrier of meaning. In virtually every human culture, darkness represents evil, ignorance, death, the unknown. Light represents good, knowledge, life, understanding. These symbolic associations are so deep and so universal that they must have some basis in the human experience of actual light and darkness. The association of darkness with evil makes sense given the evolutionary history we have explored. In darkness, bad things happened, predators attacked, people died. The darkness was literally dangerous, and so it became symbolically evil. The metaphor arose from the reality, the abstraction from the concrete experience. The association of darkness with the unknown also makes sense. In darkness you cannot see. You do not know what is there. The darkness hides things, conceals them, makes them mysterious. This experiential unknown became symbolic of all unknowns, all mysteries, all things that we do not understand. The association of darkness with death is perhaps the most profound. When we die, we close our eyes, and there is darkness. The afterlife, in many traditions, is a place of shadow, a realm where light does not reach. The darkness is the colour of death, the visual experience of ending, the hue of the void that awaits us all. These symbolic associations amplify the fear of physical darkness. When you're in the dark, you are not just in a place without light, you're in a place associated with evil, with the unknown, with death itself. The darkness carries a symbolic weight that adds to its physical threat, making it more frightening than it would be if it were simply an absence of photons. This symbolic dimension is partly why the fear of darkness is so hard to overcome through rational thought. You can tell yourself that there is nothing dangerous in the darkness, but the darkness still feels wrong, still feels threatening, still carries associations of evil and death that rational thought cannot easily dispel. The symbols live in a different part of the mind than logic, and they are not easily defeated by argument. The fear of darkness is also connected to the fear of the unconscious mind. Sigmund Freud and other psychoanalysts saw darkness as a symbol for the unconscious, for the parts of the mind that are hidden from awareness, that operate below the surface, that contain repressed thoughts and feelings. To fear the darkness in this view is to fear what is inside us, the unknown depths of our own psyches. This psychological interpretation has some validity. When we are in the dark alone with our thoughts, the mind can go to strange places. Without the distraction of visual input, we are left with our inner world, our memories, our fears, our desires. The darkness becomes a mirror for the psyche, reflecting back whatever is inside us. If what is inside is fearful, the darkness becomes fearful. The fear of darkness is often worse when we are alone. In company, the fear is shared, and the presence of others provides reassurance. But alone in the dark, there is no one to share the fear, no one to provide reality checks, no one to say that the sound was just the house settling, or that the shape was just a shadow. Alone, the mind can spiral into fear without external constraint. This is why solitary confinement in darkness is one of the most severe punishments humans have devised. To be alone in the dark for extended periods is psychologically devastating, producing anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and sometimes permanent mental damage. The darkness, combined with isolation, is more than the human mind was designed to bear. Let me now explore the cultural expressions of the fear of darkness, the ways that different societies have understood and managed this universal human experience. Every culture has stories about what happens in the dark: monsters, ghosts, demons, spirits. The specific forms vary, but the pattern is universal. The darkness is populated with threatening entities, beings that cannot be seen, that attack the unwary, that must be guarded against through ritual, prayer, or vigilance. These stories are not just entertainment. They are instructions. They teach children to fear the dark, to stay in safe places at night, to be vigilant against threats. They reinforce the natural fear with cultural elaboration, adding specific content to the general unease. The child who hears stories of the monster in the woods will fear the woods at night. The child who hears stories of ghosts in graveyards will fear graveyards. But these stories also provide structure to the fear. A named monster is in some ways less frightening than an unnamed threat. If you know what you are afraid of, you can take specific precautions. If you know the monster's weaknesses, you can exploit them. If you know the rules of the supernatural world, you can follow them and stay safe. Cultural stories about darkness provide a framework for understanding and managing the fear. Religious traditions often address the fear of darkness directly. Prayers for protection during the night, rituals to ward off evil spirits, beliefs about guardian angels or protective deities, all of these are responses to the fear of darkness. They provide psychological comfort, the sense that even in the dark you're not alone, that supernatural protection is available. The belief in protective supernatural entities is remarkably common across cultures. The guardian angel of Christianity, the protective ancestors of many African and Asian traditions, the household gods of ancient Rome, all of these serve a similar function. They stand between the believer and the terrors of the night. With protection from above, the darkness becomes less threatening. Let me tell you about the specific predators that hunted our ancestors, the real monsters that populated the night. The leopard was perhaps the most fearsome nocturnal predator of early humans. Leopards are solitary hunters, stealthy and patient, capable of approaching prey without being detected until the moment of attack. They are strong enough to kill humans and to drag the body into a tree, away from scavengers. Fossil evidence shows that leopards regularly preyed on early hominins, leaving their bones in caves that served as leopard lairs. The leopard hunts at night. Its spotted coat provides camouflage in the dappled moonlight, breaking up its outline, making it almost invisible. Its eyes are adapted for low light, able to see clearly when human eyes can see nothing. Its padded feet make no sound as it approaches. By the time you knew a leopard was there, it was often too late. The lion also hunted early humans, though lions are less purely nocturnal than leopards. Lions hunt in prides, coordinating their attacks, driving prey toward waiting ambushes. A group of early humans on the savanna at night was a potential target for a lion pride, which could surround the group and pick off individuals despite their numerical defense. Lions are terrifying in a different way than leopards. Where the leopard is invisible until it strikes, the lion announces its presence. The roar of a lion is one of the most intimidating sounds in nature, a deep, resonant vocalization that carries for miles. To hear a lion roar in the darkness was to know that death might be approaching, that one of the apex predators of Africa was out there, hunting. Hyenas were another nocturnal threat. Unlike the cats, hyenas are primarily scavengers, but they are also capable hunters when opportunity arises. Their eerie calls, the whooping and cackling that gives them their reputation, would have been terrifyingly familiar to early humans. Hyenas are persistent and numerous, and a clan of hyenas could overwhelm defenses that might stop a single predator. The African wild dog, though now rare, was once more common and posed a threat to early humans. Wild dogs hunt in packs, using coordinated tactics to run down prey over long distances. Their hunts often continue into twilight and darkness, and a pack of wild dogs is a formidable threat to any prey species. Crocodiles waited in and near water. Early humans needed water, and water sources were particularly dangerous at night, when crocodiles were most active. The crocodile attacks by ambush, lunging from the water with explosive speed, grabbing its prey and dragging it underwater to drown. Many early humans must have died this way, taken while drinking or crossing water in the darkness. Snakes, too, were a nocturnal threat. Many venomous snakes are nocturnal, hunting in the cooler hours of darkness. A human who stepped on a snake in the dark might be bitten before knowing the snake was there. Snake venom could kill, and even non-fatal bites could lead to infection and death in a world without medicine. These were the real monsters of the night, the actual threats that shaped the fear of darkness. They were not imaginary, they were terribly real, and though most modern humans will never encounter a leopard or a lion, the fear that these predators inscribed in our ancestors' brains remains, triggered by darkness even when the predators are absent. The night carried other dangers beyond predators. Let me tell you about these other threats, the hazards that made darkness dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with being eaten. Getting lost was a serious danger. In the darkness, without landmarks to navigate by, without the sun to orient by, early humans could easily become disoriented. The familiar terrain of the day became an unmappable wilderness at night. A wrong turn could lead away from the group, away from safety, into territory controlled by predators or competing human bands. Being lost at night meant being alone, and being alone meant death. A solitary human in the African night had almost no chance of survival. Without the group's collective vigilance, without the protection of numbers, without anyone to help if injured or ill, the lone human was prey. The fear of getting lost, the fear of separation from the group, became intertwined with the fear of darkness itself. Falls and injuries were common in the dark. The ground is uneven, covered with obstacles that are invisible without light. Roots catch feet, stones turn ankles, holes swallow legs. A fall in the darkness could mean a broken bone, and a broken bone could mean death. Without modern medicine, even minor injuries could become life-threatening through infection or incapacitation. Your ancestors had to stay still in the dark not just because of predators, but because movement itself was dangerous. The safest strategy was to find a secure position and remain there until dawn, when the world became navigable again. This behavioral pattern, freezing in response to darkness, became part of human psychology, triggered automatically even in modern environments where the hazards of movement are minimal. Drowning was another risk. Water sources that were safe during the day became deadly at night. Without seeing the edge of a river or the depth of a pool, early humans could easily stumble into water over their heads. Once in deep water in the darkness, finding your way back to safety was nearly impossible. Many must have drowned in waters that would have been harmless in daylight. Venomous creatures were everywhere. Snakes, scorpions, spiders, many of them were most active at night, hunting in the hours when the temperature was cooler. A human moving through the darkness might step on a snake, disturb a scorpion's hiding place, walk into a spider's web. The sting or bite could be fatal, and even if not fatal, the pain and incapacitation could leave the victim vulnerable to other threats. The night also brought cold. Without the sun's warmth, temperatures could drop dramatically, especially in certain seasons or at higher elevations. Early humans, having lost most of their body hair, were poorly insulated against cold. A night without fire, without adequate shelter, could mean hypothermia and death. The darkness itself was not cold, of course, but darkness coincided with cold, and the two became associated in the human mind. Hunger intensified at night. Early humans could not forage in the darkness, could not find food, could not replenish the energy they had spent during the day. If the day's foraging had been unsuccessful, the night was a time of hunger, of stomachs growling, of the body demanding nutrition that could not be obtained until dawn. The darkness became associated with scarcity, with want, with the gnawing discomfort of unmet needs. Thirst was similar. Water sources were dangerous at night, patrolled by predators, difficult to find. Even if water could be located, drinking in the darkness meant risking crocodile attack or falling into the water. The night was a time when thirst might build but not be safely quenched. adding another discomfort to the hours of darkness. All of these dangers, combined with the threat of predation, made the night genuinely terrifying for our ancestors. This was not neurosis or overreaction. This was appropriate fear, calibrated to real threats, guiding behavior that increased the chances of survival. The human brain evolved to fear the darkness because fearing the darkness kept humans alive. Let me now talk about how the fear of darkness manifests in modern humans, how this ancient adaptation appears in a world where most of the original threats have been eliminated. Children fear the dark intensely. This is universal, appearing in every culture, every society, every era. Children who have never been told scary stories still fear the dark. Children who have never experienced anything frightening at night still do not want to sleep alone without a light. The fear is innate, built into the developing brain, present before experience could explain it. The intensity of this fear makes sense evolutionarily. Children were the most vulnerable to nocturnal predation. A child left alone in the darkness was almost certain to die, either from predation or from separation from the group. The fear that kept children close to their parents, that kept them from wandering off into the night, was intensely adaptive. Children who feared the darkness survived. Those who did not became casualties of the night. The fear typically diminishes as children grow older. Adolescents and adults usually fear the darkness less intensely than young children. This makes sense as well. As humans mature, they become more capable of defending themselves, more able to navigate the night, more useful as sentinels for the group rather than liabilities to be protected. The fear decreases because the vulnerability decreases. But the fear never entirely disappears. Even adults, even brave adults, feel something when the lights go out. The momentary hesitation when entering a dark room. The preference for lit streets over dark alleys. The unease that comes when the power goes out and the familiar world is suddenly unfamiliar. These are the residues of the ancient fear, diminished, but not eliminated by age and experience. Some adults retain an intense fear of darkness throughout their lives. This is true nyctophobia, a clinical condition that can significantly impair quality of life. People with severe nyctophobia may be unable to sleep without lights, may avoid situations where darkness is possible, may experience panic attacks when confronted with darkness. For these individuals, the fear that was adaptive for our ancestors has become maladaptive in the modern world. The treatment for nyctophobia typically involves exposure therapy, gradually increasing exposure to darkness while managing the anxiety response. The therapy works by helping the brain learn that darkness is not actually dangerous, that the ancient fear response is no longer appropriate. But this learning is difficult because it is working against millions of years of evolution. The fear is deep, and changing it requires sustained effort. Even without clinical nyctophobia, fear of darkness affects many aspects of modern life. The lighting of streets, the illumination of buildings, the lamps beside our beds, all of these are responses to the fear. We spend enormous resources on artificial light, not just for practical reasons, but for psychological ones. We want to banish the darkness because the darkness feels threatening, even when we know intellectually that it is not. Horror movies and stories exploit the fear of darkness with great effectiveness. The horror genre knows that darkness is frightening, that the unseen is more terrifying than the seen, that leaving threats in shadow amplifies their power. The most effective horror often shows very little, relying instead on darkness and suggestion to trigger the audience's own fears. The monster you imagine is more frightening than any monster the filmmakers could create. This is why the sounds in horror movies are so important. In darkness, hearing becomes the primary sense, and horror filmmakers know this. The creaking floorboard, the whispered voice, the distant scream, all of these work on the imagination, suggesting threats that the eye cannot see. The horror of sound in darkness taps into the same psychology that kept our ancestors alert through the night. Let me tell you about the neuroscience of fear of darkness in more detail, about the specific brain systems that produce this experience. The amygdala, which I mentioned earlier, is central to the fear of darkness. This small structure processes emotional information, particularly threat-related information, and triggers appropriate responses. In brain imaging studies, the amygdala activates more strongly in response to images of dark scenes than to images of light scenes, even when the content of the scenes is otherwise identical. The darkness itself is a threat cue that the amygdala responds to. the amygdala does not work alone. It is connected to other brain regions that contribute to the fear experience. The hippocampus, which processes memory, provides context and recall of past threatening experiences. The prefrontal cortex, which is involved in reasoning and planning, can sometimes regulate the amygdala's response, but often fails to do so effectively, especially when the fear is intense. The hypothalamus coordinates the body's physiological response to fear, controlling heart rate, breathing, and hormonal release. The visual cortex is also involved in the fear of darkness, though in a different way. When deprived of visual input, the visual cortex does not simply go quiet. Instead, it becomes more active in some ways, generating visual experiences even without visual input. This is the basis for the hallucinations that can occur in darkness, the shapes and figures that the brain creates to fill the visual void. The visual cortex, deprived of its normal input, starts making things up, and what it makes up is often threatening. Neurotransmitters play a crucial role in the fear of darkness. When the fear response is triggered, norepinephrine is released, increasing alertness and preparing the body for action. Cortisol is released, mobilizing energy and suppressing non-essential functions. In the longer term, serotonin levels may drop in darkness, contributing to the lowered mood that often accompanies fear. The circadian rhythm interacts with the fear of darkness in complex ways. The brain has internal clocks that track time of day, and these clocks influence many psychological states, including fearfulness. At night, when the brain expects darkness, it also expects certain threats. The circadian system primes the fear response, making it easier to trigger and more intense when triggered. This is why the same dark room may feel more threatening at 2 in the morning than at 2 in the afternoon. Sleep deprivation intensifies the fear of darkness. When we are tired, the prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate emotional responses, becomes less effective. The amygdala, by contrast, remains active and may even become hyperactive. The result is that sleep-deprived individuals are more fearful in general, and particularly fearful of darkness. The long nights of our ancestors, with their fragmented sleep and constant vigilance, would have been times of intense fear. Let me now explore the fear of darkness across different stages of human history, tracing how the fear has changed as human circumstances have changed. For most of human history, darkness was absolute. Before fire, before artificial light of any kind, darkness meant the complete absence of light. On a moonless, cloudy night, the darkness would have been total, impenetrable, impossible to see through regardless of how well one's eyes adapted. This absolute darkness was the original environment of the fear, the context in which the fear evolved. The control of fire, as I mentioned, was the first partial victory over darkness. Fire provided light, but limited light that extended only so far, light that could be extinguished. The darkness retreated but did not disappear. Beyond the circle of firelight, the night remained as dark and threatening as ever. For hundreds of thousands of years, fire was the only artificial light available to humans. Torches could be carried, extending the circle of light somewhat, but torches were dangerous, unreliable, and required fuel. For most purposes, fire meant stationary fire that created fixed circles of safety, rather than illumination that could travel. The invention of oil lamps, perhaps 10,000 years ago, provided a more portable and reliable source of light. An oil lamp could be carried, could be placed in enclosed spaces, could burn for extended periods with minimal attention. Lamps were expensive, requiring oil that had to be obtained and stored, but they allowed a new relationship with darkness, one where light could be taken into spaces that fire could not reach. Candles, developed perhaps 5,000 years ago, were another advance. Candles were more portable than lamps, more reliable than torches, and could be produced in large quantities from animal fat or beeswax. For most of recorded history, candles were the primary means of illuminating the night for those who could afford them. The wealthy lived in candlelit splendor, while the poor endured darkness or spent precious resources on inferior illumination. Gaslighting, developed in the early 19th century, was a revolution. For the first time, light could be produced on an industrial scale, piped through streets and buildings, available at the turn of a valve. Gaslit streets were safer because crime decreased when criminals could be seen. Gaslit homes were more comfortable because activities that required light could continue after sunset. The darkness retreated further, pushed back by the steady glow of gas flames. Electric lighting, developed in the late 19th century, completed the revolution. Electric light was safer than gas, brighter, more reliable, and eventually cheaper. Over the course of the 20th century, electric light spread across the world, banishing darkness from cities, from homes, from roads and factories and public spaces. Today, most people in developed countries live in environments where darkness is optional, where light is available at the flip of a switch, where the night has been largely conquered. But the fear remains, despite all this light. Despite the banishment of darkness from most human spaces, the ancient fear persists. Turn off the lights in any room, and the fear can return, triggered by the same stimulus that triggered it in our ancestors 1,000,000 years ago. The conquest of darkness is external, the fear is internal, and it has not been conquered at all. Let me tell you about darkness in mythology and religion, about how human cultures have given meaning to this universal fear. In the beginning, according to many creation myths, there was darkness. Before the gods created light, before the universe had form, before anything existed, there was the void, the abyss, the primordial darkness. This mythological darkness is not just the absence of light, it is the absence of everything, the nothing from which something came. The Hebrew Bible opens with darkness. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. The first act of creation is the creation of light, separating it from the darkness, establishing the fundamental distinction that structures the rest of existence. Light is good. Darkness is what existed before good came to be. Similar patterns appear in other mythologies. The Greek chaos, the formless void from which the gods emerged, is often depicted as darkness. The Egyptian creation myths describe the primordial waters of Nun, dark and formless, from which the sun god Ra emerged to bring light and order. The Norse myths describe Ginnungagap, the yawning void that existed before the worlds were created. These mythological darknesses are not just about the absence of physical light. They represent the absence of order, of meaning, of existence itself. The darkness is chaos, and the creation of light is the establishment of cosmos, of an ordered universe where life and meaning are possible. To fear darkness, in this mythological framework, is to fear the dissolution of order, the return to chaos, the undoing of creation. The battle between light and darkness is a common mythological theme. In Zoroastrianism, the religion of ancient Persia, this battle is the central narrative. Ahura Mazda, the god of light and truth, is locked in eternal conflict with Angra Mainyu, the god of darkness and lies. The universe is the battlefield, and human beings must choose sides, aligning themselves with light or darkness. Christianity inherited some of this dualism. The Gospel of John describes Jesus as the light of the world, and the entire New Testament is filled with light and darkness imagery. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. The struggle between good and evil is cast as a struggle between light and darkness, with the forces of darkness ultimately defeated by the light of Christ. In many traditions, the underworld, the realm of the dead, is a place of darkness. The Greek Hades, the Hebrew Sheol, the Egyptian Duat, all of these are depicted as dark realms, places where the light of the sun does not reach. To die is to enter the darkness, to leave the world of light forever. The fear of darkness thus becomes connected to the fear of death, the two fears intertwining in the human psyche. Demons and evil spirits are often associated with darkness. They are creatures of the night, beings that cannot tolerate light, entities that must be banished by the rising sun. The horror movie Vampire, Destroyed by Sunlight, is a modern version of this ancient idea. The darkness is their domain, and in the darkness they have power over humans. But darkness is not always evil in mythology. Some traditions see darkness as a necessary complement to light, part of a balanced whole rather than a force to be defeated. The Chinese yin and yang represent this balance, with darkness, yin, and light, yang, as equal and interdependent forces. In this view, darkness is not evil, but simply the other half of existence, necessary for completeness. Some spiritual traditions value darkness as a context for enlightenment. The dark night of the soul, described by the mystic saint John of the Cross, is a period of spiritual darkness that precedes illumination. In this tradition, darkness is not something to be feared, but something to be passed through, a necessary stage in the journey toward the light. Let me tell you about the practical strategies our ancestors developed for surviving the night, the behavioral adaptations that complemented the psychological fear. Site selection was crucial. Not all places were equally safe for sleeping. Our ancestors would have learned through experience and transmitted knowledge which sites offered protection and which were dangerous. Rocky outcrops where predators could not approach from all directions. Trees with thick branches where humans could climb out of reach of ground predators. Caves where the opening could be defended and fire could burn safely. The selection of sleeping sites shows evidence of careful thought in the archaeological record. Early human sites are often in locations that would have been defensible, with good sightlines, limited approaches, and features that would have aided protection. This is not random. It is the result of selection pressure favouring those who chose their sleeping sites wisely. Sentinels were another strategy. In many primate species, some individuals remain awake and vigilant while others sleep. They watch for predators, raising the alarm if danger approaches. Early humans likely did the same, taking turns standing guard through the night, ensuring that the group was never entirely asleep and vulnerable. This sentinel behaviour may be the origin of the human tendency to wake during the night. Unlike many other animals, humans do not sleep in one consolidated block. We wake periodically, briefly, before returning to sleep. This pattern may be a vestige of sentinel behaviour, the brain automatically checking the environment for threats before allowing sleep to continue. Fire tending was another nighttime responsibility. Once fire was controlled, keeping it burning became essential. A fire that went out left the group unprotected, vulnerable to the predators that fire kept at bay. Someone had to watch the fire, feed it fuel, ensure that it burned through the night. This duty, which fell to some members of the group while others slept, was a matter of life and death. Noise discipline was important. Sounds could attract predators, revealing the location of the group. Early humans likely learned to be quiet at night, to suppress sounds that might draw dangerous attention. Children who cried were a particular risk, and mothers would have worked to keep infants quiet, using nursing, rocking, and close contact to soothe them. Weapons were prepared and kept close. Even before sophisticated tools, early humans would have had sticks, rocks, anything that could be used to fight off an attacking predator. These would be gathered before nightfall and kept within reach through the night. The first spears, developed hundreds of thousands of years ago, would have greatly increased the ability to defend against nocturnal predators. Group coordination was essential. In an attack, individuals needed to respond quickly and effectively. This required some level of planning, some understanding of who would do what, some coordination of the group's defensive response. The social complexity required for effective night defense may have contributed to the evolution of human social intelligence and communication. These strategies worked. If they had not, our ancestors would not have survived to become ancestors. But they required effort, vigilance, resources, and the expenditure of energy that could otherwise have been used for other purposes. The night was costly, in every sense. The fear of darkness motivated the behaviours that mitigated these costs, driving the investments that made survival possible. Let me now tell you about how the fear of darkness interacts with other fears, how this primal terror connects to other aspects of human psychology. The fear of darkness is related to the fear of the unknown. Darkness hides things, making them unknown. The fear of what might be there, of what could be lurking unseen, is fundamentally a fear of the unknown. This is why the fear of darkness is often worse when you're in an unfamiliar place. The familiar darkness of your own bedroom is less frightening than the unfamiliar darkness of a strange room, because you know what should be in your bedroom and you do not know what might be in the strange room. The fear of darkness is related to the fear of loss of control. In darkness, you cannot see what is happening, cannot predict what will happen, cannot control your environment as you can in the light. This loss of control is inherently frightening for humans, who are creatures that survive through understanding and manipulating their environments. Darkness takes away this capacity, leaving us helpless in ways that light does not. The fear of darkness is related to claustrophobia, the fear of enclosed spaces. There is a sensory similarity between being in the dark and being in a small space. Both involve restricted perception, limited movement, a sense of being trapped. For some people, darkness triggers the same panic response as enclosed spaces, and for some, the two fears are impossible to separate. The fear of darkness is related to the fear of death. As I mentioned, darkness is symbolically associated with death in many cultures. The eternal darkness of death, the closing of the eyes forever, the void that awaits us all. For some people, especially as they age, the fear of darkness becomes bound up with the fear of mortality, with the recognition that one day the light will go out and never return. The fear of darkness is related to the fear of abandonment. Children left alone in the dark are doubly abandoned, separated both from their caregivers and from the sensory connection to the world that light provides. The fear of darkness often intensifies in the context of loneliness, when there is no one else present to share the darkness, no one to provide reassurance or protection. These related fears can amplify each other. A person who fears the unknown may find the darkness particularly terrifying because it is the environment of maximum unknowing. A person who fears loss of control may find darkness unbearable because it represents total loss of visual control. The fear of darkness is not a single, simple fear, but a complex of related anxieties, each feeding into and reinforcing the others. Let me tell you about darkness and sleep, about the paradox that the environment we fear is also the environment we need for rest. Humans are supposed to sleep in darkness. Our circadian rhythms are tuned to the light-dark cycle, and the onset of darkness triggers the release of melatonin, the hormone that promotes sleep. In the modern world, with its electric lights and screens, many people do not get enough darkness, and their sleep suffers as a result. But the darkness that promotes sleep is also the darkness that triggers fear. How do we reconcile these two responses? How do we sleep in an environment that makes us afraid? The answer lies partly in the concept of safety. When we feel safe, the fear of darkness is diminished, and the sleep-promoting effects can predominate. A secure shelter, a locked door, the presence of others, all of these signals of safety can suppress the fear response, allowing the body to shift into sleep mode. This is why so many people cannot sleep without some form of safety signal. The nightlight that children need is not just about being able to see, it is about the reassurance that the light provides, the signal that all is well, that the darkness is not truly dark. Adults may not need a nightlight, but they need something, some signal of safety that allows the fear response to diminish. The transition to sleep involves a vulnerability that connects to the fear of darkness. As you fall asleep, you lose awareness of your surroundings. You cannot watch for threats, cannot hear as well, cannot respond to danger. Sleep is a kind of temporary death, a nightly practice in the surrender of vigilance. No wonder the darkness that promotes sleep is also the darkness that frightens us. Some people cannot sleep in the dark at all. For these individuals, the fear response is too strong, overriding the sleep-promoting effects of darkness. They need light to sleep, which means their sleep is often poor, since light interferes with the circadian signals that promote deep sleep. They're caught between two biological imperatives, needing both darkness and light, unable to find a comfortable balance. The fear of darkness may actually serve sleep in some circumstances. The fear motivates seeking shelter, which provides a safe environment for sleep. The fear motivates staying still, which is conducive to rest. The fear motivates gathering together, which provides the social safety signals that allow sleep to occur. In this view, the fear of darkness is part of the sleep system, not opposed to it. But in the modern world, where the threats that the fear evolved to address are absent, the fear often interferes with sleep. Lying in bed, in the safe darkness of a modern bedroom, people experience fear that has no basis in reality, but that feels real nonetheless. The racing heart, the strained ears, the imagination populating the shadows with threats, all of these are incompatible with sleep. The ancient fear, which once helped our ancestors survive the night, now keeps some of their descendants awake through it. Let me tell you about the strange human relationship with darkness, the ways in which we simultaneously fear it and seek it out. We fear the dark, and yet we are drawn to it. Horror movies, scary stories, haunted houses, all of these involve deliberately seeking out experiences of fear and darkness. We pay money to be frightened, to sit in dark theatres and watch dark stories, to enter dark attractions where actors jump out at us. This seems paradoxical. Why would we seek out what we fear? The answer may lie in the difference between real danger and simulated danger. When we watch a horror movie, we know that we are safe. The darkness on the screen cannot hurt us. The monster in the haunted house is an actor. The fear is triggered. but the danger is absent. This allows us to experience the thrill of fear without the risk. Some psychologists believe that this safe fear serves a purpose. It allows us to practice the fear response, to experience it in controlled conditions, to become familiar with it. It allows us to process our anxieties in a context where we can control when the fear starts and stops. It allows us to prove to ourselves that we can handle fear, that we can face the darkness and survive. Teenagers and young adults in particular are drawn to horror and darkness. This may be because this age group is in the process of establishing independence, of separating from parental protection, of preparing to face the world alone. The horror movie is a test, a way of proving that one can handle fear, that one is ready to face the dangers that adults face. There is also pleasure in fear, or at least in the relief that follows fear. The physiological arousal of fear, the racing heart and the heightened senses, is similar to the arousal of excitement. When the fear ends and we realize we are safe, there is a rush of relief that feels pleasurable. Horror movies and haunted houses provide this rush, the pleasure of fear survived. The darkness can also be romantic. Dimmed lights, candlelit dinners, nighttime walks under the stars, all of these involve darkness, but a controlled, comfortable darkness that enhances rather than threatens. In this context, darkness provides intimacy, privacy, a sense of being enclosed together in a space apart from the world. The fear of darkness can be transmuted into something else, something pleasurable and connecting. Darkness can be spiritual. Many religious practices involve darkness, from the darkened church to the meditative retreat in a dark room. In darkness, the visual world fades away, and attention can turn inward, to the soul, to the divine, to whatever lies beyond the physical. The darkness that terrifies can also enlighten, depending on the context and the mindset of the person experiencing it. Let me tell you about the modern experience of darkness, about what happens when our illuminated world goes dark. Power outages provide a glimpse of what darkness meant to our ancestors. When the lights go out, when the screens go dark, when the constant hum of electrical civilization falls silent, something changes. The darkness that descends is not complete, not the absolute darkness of a prehistoric night, but it is enough. It is enough to trigger the ancient fear, to remind us that we are creatures who evolved in the dark. People behave differently during power outages. They stay close together. They light candles, creating circles of light that echo the ancestral fire. They speak in lowered voices. They listen to the darkness, alert to sounds they normally ignore. The thin veneer of modernity peels back, and the prehistoric human emerges, fearful, vigilant, seeking safety in numbers and light. The fear during power outages is not entirely irrational. Crime rates often increase when the lights go out. Looters take advantage of the darkness. Violence becomes easier when witnesses cannot see. The darkness is safer in the modern world than it was for our ancestors, but it is not entirely safe. The ancient threats are gone, but new threats have taken their place. Some people deliberately seek out darkness. They turn off all the lights, close the curtains, sit in the dark. They may be doing this for meditation, for sensory deprivation, for the experience of true darkness in a world where true darkness is rare. For these seekers, darkness is not something to fear, but something to explore. A frontier that most people never approach. Caves offer darkness of a kind that is almost impossible to find elsewhere. Deep caves, beyond the reach of daylight, are absolutely dark in a way that even the darkest night is not. Cave explorers describe this darkness as profound, overwhelming, qualitatively different from ordinary darkness. The experience can be disorienting, frightening, and also strangely peaceful, depending on the individual and the context. Some people have experienced extended periods in darkness, either voluntarily or involuntarily. Prisoners in solitary confinement, monks in dark retreats, researchers in sensory deprivation experiments, all of these have encountered darkness in ways that most people never do. Their accounts describe initial fear giving way to other experiences, hallucinations, altered states of consciousness, and sometimes a strange peace that comes from surrendering to the dark. Let me tell you about light pollution, about how our fear of darkness has led us to banish it so thoroughly that the banishment itself has become a problem. Most people in the developed world have never seen true darkness. The sky is never fully dark, glowing with the reflected light of cities. The streets are never fully dark, illuminated by streetlights and headlights and the glow from windows. True darkness, the darkness of a moonless night in a place without artificial light, is increasingly rare. This banishment of darkness has consequences. One is the loss of the night sky. The stars, which were visible to every human who ever lived before the 20th century, are now invisible to most people. The Milky Way, which once arched across the sky in a river of light, cannot be seen from most populated areas. We have gained safety from darkness but lost wonder. Light pollution affects wildlife. Many animals are adapted for darkness, their behaviours tuned to the cycle of day and night. Artificial light disrupts these patterns, confusing migration, interfering with mating, disrupting feeding. Sea turtles, confused by coastal lights, wander inland instead of toward the sea. Birds, attracted to illuminated buildings, die in collisions. The conquest of darkness has consequences beyond the human sphere. Light pollution affects human health. The circadian rhythm depends on darkness. When we do not experience enough darkness, the rhythm is disrupted and health consequences follow. Sleep disorders, metabolic problems, increased cancer risk, all of these have been linked to excessive light exposure. In our fear of darkness, we have created an environment that may be harming us in subtle but significant ways. There is now a movement to reclaim darkness. Dark sky preserves protect areas from light pollution, preserving the night sky for viewing. Some cities are reducing street lighting using dimmer lights, directing lights downward instead of upward. There is growing recognition that darkness is not just something to be feared and banished, but something to be valued and preserved. This is a strange position for a species that evolved to fear darkness. We are beginning to recognize that our fear, so adaptive in the prehistoric past, may have led us astray in the modern present. The darkness we worked so hard to eliminate turns out to be necessary for our health, our ecosystems, and our sense of wonder. The ancient enemy is also a needed friend. Let me tell you about the experience of darkness in different environments, about how context shapes the fear. Urban darkness is different from rural darkness. In a city, even at night, there is light, street lights, car headlights, the glow from windows and signs. All of these provide some illumination. The darkness is never complete. Urban dwellers may rarely experience true darkness, and when they do, it may be particularly frightening because of its unfamiliarity. Rural darkness is deeper and more complete. Away from cities, the night sky is darker, the shadows deeper, the experience closer to what our ancestors knew. Rural dwellers often have a different relationship with darkness than urban dwellers, more familiar with it, more accepting of it, though still not immune to its fears. Wilderness darkness is the closest modern humans can come to prehistoric darkness. In a wilderness area, far from any artificial light, the darkness at night can be almost complete. The stars provide some light, and the moon, when present, provides more, but on a moonless, cloudy night in the wilderness, the darkness can be profound. This is the darkness our ancestors knew, and entering it can trigger ancient fears in ways that urban or rural darkness does not. The darkness of enclosed spaces is different from the darkness of open spaces. A dark room feels different from a dark field. The enclosed space adds claustrophobia to the fear of darkness, the sense of being trapped as well as blind. Many people find enclosed darkness more frightening than open darkness, because there is no escape, no direction in which to flee. The darkness of familiar spaces is different from the darkness of unfamiliar spaces. Your own bedroom in the dark is less frightening than a stranger's bedroom in the dark. Familiarity provides a mental map that substitutes for visual information. You know where the furniture is, where the door is, where safety can be found. In an unfamiliar space, this mental map is absent, and the darkness is more complete. Let me tell you about how the fear of darkness has shaped human architecture, the built environments that protect us from the night. Windows were not always made of glass. For most of human history, windows were simply openings in walls, covered with shutters or fabric but not transparent. These windows let in light during the day but could be closed at night, sealing the interior against the outside darkness. The house became a refuge, a place where the darkness could be kept out. Glass windows changed this relationship. Transparent windows let in light but also let in the sight of darkness. A glass window at night is a portal to the outside, a place where the darkness can be seen even if it cannot enter. Many people find uncovered windows at night unsettling. the darkness outside pressing against the glass, threatening to come in. The placement of sleeping areas reflects the fear of darkness. Bedrooms are typically located away from entrances, in the interior of houses, in upper floors if available. This placement makes intuitive sense, moving the sleeping body as far as possible from where threats might enter. Even in a world without predators, we sleep better when we feel protected from what might come through the door. The design of doors reflects the same fear. Doors can be locked, barred, fortified. A solid door is a statement that the outside, including its darkness, cannot enter. The rituals of locking up at night, of checking the doors before bed, of ensuring that the house is sealed, these are modern versions of the ancient behaviors that protected our ancestors from nocturnal predators. Lighting design has become a sophisticated field, concerned not just with providing light but with managing darkness. Security lighting keeps the darkness at bay around buildings. Interior lighting creates hierarchies of light and shadow, using darkness for atmosphere while maintaining enough light for safety. The designers who plan our illuminated environments are working with the fear of darkness, managing it, channeling it, but never entirely eliminating it. Safe rooms and bunkers represent the extreme of this architectural response to fear. These are spaces designed for maximum security, often underground, sealed, defended. They are adult versions of the blanket fort that children build to hide from the dark. They represent the recognition that sometimes the darkness, and what it might contain, is a real threat, one that requires serious defense. Let me tell you about how the fear of darkness affects behavior, the practical ways that this ancient fear shapes modern life. People avoid dark places. Given a choice between a lit street and a dark street, most people will choose the lit one, even if the dark one is shorter or more convenient. This avoidance is so automatic that we rarely think about it, but it is constantly shaping our movements through the world. People avoid being alone in the dark. If they must be in darkness, they prefer company. Two people in the dark are less frightened than one person alone. This preference for company in darkness is a vestige of the ancestral strategy of huddling together, of facing the night as a group rather than as isolated individuals. People keep lights on even when not needed. The light in the hallway, the lamp in the living room, the porch light that burns all night, these are not always functionally necessary. They are comfort lights, fear-managing lights, lights that push back the darkness, even when there is no practical task that requires illumination. People sleep better with some signal of safety related to light. For children, this is the night light. For adults, it might be the knowledge that there is a light switch within reach, that light can be summoned instantly if needed. The ability to banish darkness, even if not exercised, provides comfort that facilitates sleep. People experience more fear at certain times of night than others. The hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, sometimes called the witching hour, are particularly associated with fear. This may be because these hours are the darkest, the farthest from dawn, the time when the body's circadian rhythm is at its lowest. The fear of darkness intensifies when the darkness is deepest. Let me tell you about overcoming the fear of darkness, about the techniques that can help when the ancient fear becomes too strong. Gradual exposure is the most effective technique. Rather than avoiding darkness entirely or confronting it all at once, the fearful person gradually increases their exposure, spending longer periods in dimmer conditions, slowly working up to darker environments. This allows the brain to learn that darkness is not dangerous, that the fear response is no longer needed. Cognitive techniques can help as well. Recognizing that the fear is an evolutionary vestige, not a response to real danger, can provide some relief. Telling yourself that you are safe, that there are no predators, that the darkness is empty, can help quiet the fear response. This does not eliminate the fear, but it can make it more manageable. Breathing exercises can reduce the physiological symptoms of fear. Deep, slow breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, counteracting the fight-or-flight response. When you feel fear in the dark, taking slow, deliberate breaths can calm the racing heart and lower the sense of panic. Distraction can help by occupying the mind with something other than fear. Listening to music or a podcast, counting breaths, reciting memorized text, any activity that engages the mind can reduce the cognitive resources available for fearful thinking. The imagination, unable to fully engage in generating threats, produces fewer frightening images. Creating signals of safety can make darkness more tolerable. A nightlight, a phone within reach, an easy escape route. All of these provide reassurance that helps suppress the fear response. The goal is not to eliminate darkness, but to create conditions where darkness can be tolerated. Companionship is perhaps the most powerful antidote to the fear of darkness. Having another person present, especially a trusted person, dramatically reduces the fear. This is why children climb into their parents' beds after nightmares. This is why adults sleep better with partners than alone. The presence of another person provides the social safety that our ancestors found in huddling together. Let me tell you about the paradox of this moment. As you lie here listening to this story, you're in the dark or approaching darkness. The room around you is dimming or already dim. The night is progressing and sleep is coming. And I have been telling you about fear, about predators, about the terrors that haunted your ancestors through millions of years of nights just like this one. This might seem counterproductive. How can you sleep after hearing about leopards and lions, about the monsters that hunted in the darkness, about the fears that evolution inscribed in your brain? Surely this is the wrong story for bedtime, the wrong topic for a peaceful drift into sleep. But I think the opposite is true. I think that understanding the fear of darkness is a way of making peace with it. When you know why you fear the dark, when you understand that the fear is a vestige of an ancient adaptation, when you recognize that the predators are gone and the fear remains only as an echo, something shifts. The fear becomes less mysterious, less powerful, less controlling. You're not crazy to feel a flicker of unease in the darkness. You're not weak or childish. You're human, and humans fear the dark because fearing the dark kept our ancestors alive. The fear is rational, given the environment in which it evolved, even if it is no longer rational in the environment you inhabit now. Understanding this can bring a kind of peace. The darkness around you now is not the darkness of the African savanna. There are no leopards outside your window. There are no lions waiting in the shadows. The sounds you hear are not predators approaching, but the ordinary sounds of the modern world. Houses settling, cars passing, the hum of electricity that runs through everything. The darkness is empty of the threats it once contained. Your ancestors would be amazed by your safety. They spent their nights in fear, in vigilance, in the constant awareness that death might come before dawn. You lie in a warm bed, in a secure shelter, surrounded by protections they could not have imagined. The night that terrified them is for you simply a time for rest. The darkness they feared is for you a comfort, a signal that the day is done and sleep can come. This safety is one of the great achievements of human civilization. We conquered the darkness, not just with fire and light, but with walls and locks and the whole apparatus of protection that surrounds modern life. We made the night safe, or safe enough that we can sleep through it, that we can close our eyes and surrender awareness, that we can trust the darkness not to harm us. Let me tell you about what the darkness contains now, in this modern night, in the space around you as you prepare for sleep. The darkness contains your furniture, the familiar objects of your life, waiting quietly until you need them again. The darkness contains the walls that protect you, the ceiling that shelters you, the floor that supports you. The darkness contains air, the oxygen you're breathing right now, each breath sustaining your life as you move towards sleep. The darkness contains the lives of others, the people sleeping in their own beds, in their own rooms, in homes scattered across the landscape. Right now, as you listen to this, millions of people are sleeping in the darkness, trusting it, finding rest in it. The darkness that once isolated our ancestors in their fearful huddles now connects you to a sleeping world. The darkness contains the memories of your day, the experiences that will be consolidated into long-term memory as you sleep. Sleep is not empty time. It is working time for the brain, time when experiences are processed, connections are made, learning is consolidated. The darkness provides the conditions for this essential work. The darkness contains your future, the day that will begin when the sun rises and you wake. That future is waiting for you in the darkness, ready to unfold when you are rested and ready. The darkness is not an ending but an interval, a pause between one day and the next. And the darkness contains you. You're here in the darkness, alive and aware, listening to these words, breathing, being. You're the latest link in an unbroken chain of ancestors who survived the darkness, who passed through millions of nights to give you this night, who faced the terrors of the dark so that you could lie here in safety and peace. Let me tell you about sleep itself, the destination toward which this long night is taking you. Sleep is a mystery. Despite decades of research, scientists do not fully understand why we sleep, why we need to spend a third of our lives in unconsciousness, why the brain requires these regular periods of withdrawal from the world. We know that sleep is essential, that without it we deteriorate and eventually die. But we do not know exactly what sleep does that makes it so necessary. What we do know is that sleep is restorative. After sleep, we feel better. We are more alert, more creative, more capable. The fatigue of the day is washed away, replaced by renewed energy and clarity. Whatever sleep does, the effects are unmistakable. Sleep may have evolved as a way of conserving energy during the dangerous hours of darkness. If our ancestors could not safely be active at night, then the best strategy was to reduce energy expenditure, to enter a state of lowered metabolism, to wait out the darkness while using as few calories as possible. Sleep in this view is an adaptation to the fear of darkness, a way of passing the dangerous hours in safety. But sleep is more than just waiting. During sleep, the brain is active, engaged in tasks that it cannot perform during waking. Memories are consolidated, moving from temporary storage to permanent storage. Toxins are cleared, waste products that accumulated during the day flushed out by cerebrospinal fluid. Tissues are repaired, damage healed, cells regenerated. Sleep is a busy time, even if we're not conscious of the activity. Dreams are part of sleep's mystery. During certain phases of sleep, the brain generates experiences, narratives, images that we call dreams. These dreams can be vivid, bizarre, emotional, meaningful. They can contain fears and wishes, memories and fantasies, faces of strangers and beloved friends. Why the brain produces dreams, what purpose they serve, remains debated. Some dreams are about darkness and fear. Nightmares, those terrifying dreams that wake us with racing hearts, often take place in dark settings, with threatening presences, with the feeling of being hunted or trapped. These dreams may be the brain processing the ancient fears, rehearsing the responses, keeping the fear circuits tuned even though the threats are gone. As you approach sleep now, you're approaching this whole complex process, the mysterious restoration that your brain and body need. The darkness that surrounds you is the context for this process, the environment that signals to your circadian system that it is time to sleep, that triggers the release of melatonin, that cues the body to shift from waking mode to sleeping mode. The fear of darkness has diminished as this story has progressed. I hope you have felt it, the gradual relaxation, the easing of tension, the growing acceptance of the darkness that surrounds you. The fear is still there, perhaps a faint echo, but it is manageable now. You understand it, you know where it comes from, and you know that you are safe. Let me now bring this long exploration to its close, as you bring this long day to its close, as the darkness receives you into sleep. You have learned about the fear of darkness tonight. You have learned about its evolutionary origins, the predators that made the night dangerous, the survival strategies that kept our ancestors alive. You have learned about the neuroscience of fear, the amygdala, and the hormones and the brain systems that produce the experience of terror. You have learned about the cultural expressions of the fear, the myths and stories and religions that have given meaning to the darkness. You have learned about how humans conquered the darkness, with fire and shelter and artificial light. You have learned about how the fear persists despite this conquest, an evolutionary vestige that remains even when its function is gone. You have learned about the modern experience of darkness, the power outages and the wilderness nights, and the light pollution that makes true darkness increasingly rare. And you have learned that you are safe. This is the most important thing, the thing that allows sleep to come. You are safe in the darkness, protected by the walls around you, by the door that keeps the outside out, by the civilization that has made the night a time for rest rather than terror. Your ancestors could not have imagined this safety. They spent their nights in fear, huddled together, watching and listening, waiting for dawn. They faced real threats, real predators, real dangers that could end their lives before morning, and they survived night after night, generation after generation, passing their genes and their fears down through the ages until they reached you. You carry their fear, but you do not need to carry their danger. The fear is a heritage, a reminder of where you came from, a link to the countless generations who faced the darkness and lived to see the dawn. But the danger is gone, banished by the progress of human civilization, replaced by the safety that allows you to close your eyes and sleep. The night is deep now, and your body is ready for rest. The melatonin is rising, the circadian rhythm is shifting, the brain is preparing to enter the mysterious state of sleep. Let it happen. Trust the darkness. Accept the night. Tomorrow the sun will rise as it has risen every day since the earth began to turn. The light will return, the darkness will retreat, and a new day will begin. But that is tomorrow. Tonight there is only this, the quiet darkness, the comfortable bed, the voice telling you that all is well. Sleep now, descendant of the survivors. Sleep now, inheritor of the ancient fear. Sleep now, knowing that the darkness cannot harm you, that the predators are gone, that you are safe. The fear of darkness is real and it is yours and it is human, but it does not control you. You can lie in the darkness and feel the fear and still choose to rest, to sleep, to let the night do its restorative work. Your ancestors would be proud of you. They faced the darkness with nothing but each other and their wits. You face it with understanding, with knowledge, with the safety they could only dream of. You have what they wanted. A night without terror, a sleep without danger, a rest that will restore you for the day to come. The darkness holds you now. It is not threatening. It is embracing. It is the context for sleep, the environment your body needs, the signal that the day is done. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Let your body relax. Let your breathing slow. Let the thoughts that have occupied your mind begin to drift, to fade, to give way to the deeper rhythms of sleep. The fear of darkness is ancient, but you are modern. The fear is in your brain, but so is the capacity for peace. The darkness surrounds you, but so does safety. Sleep well, creature who fears the dark. Sleep well, descendant of the hunted. Sleep well, you who carry the ancient fear, but not the ancient danger. The night is yours now. The darkness is yours. The sleep is yours. Rest deeply. Dream peacefully. Wake refreshed. The predators are gone. The dangers have passed. The darkness is empty and welcoming and safe. Tomorrow the light will return. Tonight the darkness holds you. Sleep now, human being. Sleep now, fearful creature finding peace. Sleep now, and let the ancient terror fade into the rest your body needs. The darkness is not your enemy tonight. The darkness is where you rest. The darkness is home. Sleep well. The night embraces you. The fear fades. The sleep comes. Rest now. Good night. But stay a while longer, for there are more thoughts to share as the night deepens around you. Let me tell you about the children of the dark, about the generations who grew up in the prehistoric night, who never knew a world with artificial light. Every human who lived before the modern era knew darkness in a way that we do not. They knew it intimately, daily, as an inescapable part of existence. From birth to death, they experienced true darkness every night of their lives. This was not a choice or a circumstance, but simply the nature of the world they inhabited. Children born into this world learned about darkness early. They learned that when the sun went down, the world changed. They learned that sounds meant something different at night, that shadows held potential threats, that safety meant staying close to the group, near the fire, inside the shelter. This learning was not formal instruction, but lived experience, absorbed through countless nights of watching the adults respond to the darkness. These children developed skills we have largely lost. They could navigate by starlight, using the patterns of the heavens to orient themselves. They could identify sounds in the darkness, distinguishing between the rustle of wind and the rustle of a predator's approach. They could manage their fear, channeling it into vigilance rather than letting it become panic. These were survival skills, essential for life in a world where darkness was dangerous. The stories told to these children were different from the stories we tell today. They were not merely entertaining, but instructive, teaching the dangers of the night and the strategies for surviving them. The Monster in the Dark was not just a story, but a warning. The child who wandered away from the group was not just a cautionary tale, but a realistic outcome. The stories prepared children for a world where darkness could kill. Coming of age in these societies often involved facing the darkness alone. Initiation rites in many cultures require the young person to spend time in the wilderness, often at night, facing their fears without the protection of the group. This was a test of readiness for adulthood, a demonstration that the individual could survive what the world might throw at them. Those who passed emerged transformed, having confronted the ancient fear and proven themselves capable. Let me tell you about the old ones, the elders who spent their lives in the darkness and passed their knowledge to the young. In prehistoric societies, the elderly were repositories of knowledge, including knowledge about surviving the night. They remembered which sleeping sites were safe and which were dangerous. They knew the patterns of predator behavior, when the lions were most active, when the hyenas were most bold. They could read the signs of the night sky, predicting weather and seasons. This knowledge was precious, literally life-saving. The elder who could guide the group to a safe sleeping site, who could recognize the signs of approaching predators, who could calm the fears of the young with stories and reassurance, was a valuable member of the community. Age conferred expertise in surviving the darkness. The elders also knew the stories. They were the keepers of myth and legend, the ones who could explain why the darkness existed, what it meant, how to live with it. Around the fire at night, they would tell the tales that made sense of the world, that placed human existence in a cosmic context, that gave meaning to the fear and the struggle. Many elders died in the night. The weakness of age made them vulnerable, less able to flee or fight if danger came. A predator that entered the camp might take an elder who could not move fast enough to escape. The night was particularly dangerous for those whose bodies were failing, whose senses were dimming, whose strength was waning. But some elders lived long lives, surviving night after night, accumulating decades of experience with darkness. These survivors were honoured, their knowledge valued, their counsel sought. They had faced the fear of darkness thousands of times and were still here to tell about it. That survival was itself a kind of wisdom. Let me tell you about the sounds of the prehistoric night, the auditory landscape that our ancestors inhabited. Without artificial noise, without the hum of electricity, without the roar of engines, the prehistoric night was quiet in ways we can barely imagine. But it was not silent. It was filled with sounds, natural sounds, sounds that carried information about the world. The wind was constant, moving through trees, across grasslands, around rocks. The sound of wind varied with the landscape and the season, a background presence that our ancestors knew intimately. They could tell from the wind sound whether a storm was approaching, whether the night would be calm or turbulent. Animals filled the night with calls, the roar of lions, the whoop of hyenas, the bark of baboons, the chirp of insects, the hoot of owls. Each sound carried meaning. Some sounds meant danger, the approach of a predator. Some sounds meant safety, the normal activity of harmless creatures. Our ancestors learned to decode these sounds, to extract information from the auditory environment. The absence of sound was also meaningful. When the insects suddenly fell silent, something was wrong. When the night bird stopped calling, something was approaching. The silence could be more frightening than any sound, because it meant that other creatures had detected a threat, that something was moving through the darkness that even the animals feared. Our ancestors' ears were tuned to these sounds in ways that ours are not. They could hear the soft footfall of a predator on grass, the slight rustle of scales as a snake moved. They could distinguish between the crack of a breaking branch under an animal's weight and the crack of a branch breaking in the wind. This auditory acuity was a survival skill, honed by millions of years of selection. Let me tell you about the smell of the prehistoric night, another sense that our ancestors relied upon. Smell carries information at night when vision cannot. The scent of a predator, the musk of a lion or the distinctive odour of a hyena could warn of danger before any sound was heard. Our ancestors could smell approaching threats, could detect enemies by their scent on the wind. They could also smell water, vegetation, potential food sources. The smell of ripe fruit carried on the night air could guide foraging plans for the following day. The smell of smoke from a distant fire could indicate the presence of other human groups, potential allies or competitors. The human sense of smell is poor compared to many animals, but it was still useful to our ancestors. They could smell rain approaching, could detect the metallic scent of lightning before a storm. They could smell fire before seeing it, could know if their camp's fire was dying by the fading smell of smoke. At night, without vision, the other senses became more important. Hearing and smell filled some of the gap left by the failure of sight. Our ancestors experienced the night through these senses, building a picture of their environment from sounds and scents that we, in our well-lit world, have learned to ignore. Let me tell you about the feel of the prehistoric night, the tactile experience of darkness. In darkness, touch becomes more important. The feel of the ground underfoot tells you about the terrain. The feel of air on skin tells you about temperature and wind. The feel of another body pressed close tells you that you are not alone. Our ancestors navigated by touch as much as by any other sense. They felt their way along familiar paths, knew the texture of the rocks near their sleeping sites, recognized the bark of the trees that mark safe locations. This tactile knowledge was a kind of map stored in the body rather than the mind. The feel of safety was important. The hardness of rock beneath you meant that nothing could approach from that direction. The warmth of a body next to you meant that another human was there, sharing the watch, dividing the fear. The heat of a fire on skin meant that the darkness was being held at bay, that the predators would not approach. Cold was felt most acutely at night. As the sun set and its warmth faded, the temperature dropped, and the body felt the chill. This cold drove people together, drove them toward fire, drove them to seek shelter. The discomfort of cold was part of the motivation to develop the technologies that eventually conquered the night. Let me tell you about the stars, the lights that filled the prehistoric night sky. Before artificial light, the night sky was a river of stars. The Milky Way arched overhead, a luminous band that our ancestors saw every clear night. Individual stars shone with an intensity that modern city dwellers never see, bright enough to cast faint shadows, bright enough to navigate by. Our ancestors knew the stars. They gave them names, told stories about them, used them for navigation and timekeeping. The stars were not just lights in the sky, but meaningful presences, characters in the cosmic drama, guides for the journey of life. The stars provided some light, enough to see dimly on clear nights, enough to distinguish shapes and movement. This starlight was the only light available on moonless nights, and our ancestors learned to use it, to maximize the information they could gather from the faint glow of distant suns. The moon was precious. When the full moon rose, the night was transformed. Shadows became visible, the landscape became navigable, the darkness receded. Our ancestors tracked the moon's phases, knew when it would rise and set, planned their activities around its light. The monthly cycle of the moon was one of the first calendars, a natural timepiece that structured life. But many nights the moon was absent, new or hidden by clouds, and on those nights the darkness was nearly complete. These were the most dangerous nights, the nights when predators had the greatest advantage, when humans were most vulnerable. The moonless night was the true test of survival, the deepest darkness that our ancestors faced. Let me tell you about the morning, about what it meant to survive the night. Every dawn was a victory. When the sky began to lighten in the east, when the first pale glow appeared on the horizon, our ancestors experienced something we can barely imagine: the relief of having survived, the joy of seeing another day, the gratitude for light returning to the world. This emotional response to dawn may be part of our heritage. Many people feel their mood lift as morning comes, feel a sense of hope and possibility with the rising sun. This response may be the echo of countless dawns survived, countless nights endured, countless moments when the terror of darkness gave way to the safety of light. The morning activities of our ancestors were shaped by the night they had just survived. They would emerge from their sleeping sites, stretch, look around at the world made visible again. They would assess who had survived, whether everyone was accounted for, whether the night had taken anyone. They would check the perimeter, looking for signs of predators that had approached, evidence of the dangers they had slept through. Then they would begin the day's activities, foraging, hunting, travelling, all the things that could only be done in the light. The day was for action. The night had been for survival. The rhythm of activity and rest was shaped by the fundamental divide between light and dark. As the day progressed and the sun rose higher, the fear of the previous night would fade. The terrors of darkness seemed less real in the bright light of midday. But as the afternoon wore on and the sun began to descend, the fear would return, building as evening approached, reaching its peak as the light finally failed and the darkness took hold once more. This daily cycle of fear and relief, terror and safety, was the rhythm of our ancestors' lives. They lived in a world where every night might be their last, where every dawn was a gift, where the simple act of waking up was a triumph over the darkness that sought to claim them. You are the heir of those survivors. You carry their fears, their responses, their ancient adaptations, but you also carry their triumph, their success, their continuation across millions of years and countless generations. They faced the darkness and lived. They passed through the night and saw the dawn, and now you lie in safety, in comfort, in a world they made possible by their survival. The night around you now is peaceful. The darkness is safe. The fears are echoes, not realities. You can rest now, knowing that the morning will come, that the light will return, that the night will end as nights have always ended for your ancestors. Sleep now, heir of the survivors. Sleep now, descendant of those who face the darkness. Sleep now in the safety they could only dream of. The night holds you gently. The darkness asks nothing of you but rest. Let the ancient fear fade. Let the modern safety embrace you. Let sleep come, as it came to your ancestors after the terrors of their nights, but more peacefully, more deeply, more completely. You are safe. You are home. You are ready for rest. The darkness is not your enemy. Tonight, it is your friend, the context for the sleep your body needs, the environment that signals rest. Tomorrow, the sun will rise. Tonight, the darkness holds you safe. Sleep well, child of the survivors. Sleep well, carrier of the ancient fear. Sleep well and know that you are safe. Good night. The stars that shine tonight are the same stars that shone over your ancestors when they huddled in fear of the darkness. Those distant suns have watched over millions of years of human nights, millions of years of fear and survival, millions of years of the ancient dance between darkness and light. You are connected to all of it. You are the living end of a chain that stretches back into the deep past, through all those who faced the night and lived, through all those who felt the fear and survived anyway. Their courage lives in you. Their fear lives in you. Their triumph over the darkness lives in you. The night is not your enemy. It never was, not really. It was the environment that shaped you, the challenge that made your species what it is. The fear of darkness is not a weakness but a strength, a gift from your ancestors, a tool for survival that they forged in the fires of their struggle. Tonight, you do not need that tool. Tonight, the darkness is empty of threats. Tonight, the fear can rest, along with the rest of you. The breath flows in and out. The heart beats its steady rhythm. The body relaxes, muscle by muscle, system by system. The mind releases its grip on the waking world and begins to drift toward dreams. This is what your ancestors wanted for you. This is what they survived for. This is the gift of their courage, their vigilance, their refusal to let the darkness defeat them. They faced the terrors of the night so that you could sleep in peace. Honor them by resting well. Honor them by letting go of the fear they had to carry. Honor them by accepting the safety they could not have, by sleeping the deep sleep they could not sleep, by dreaming the peaceful dreams they could not dream. The darkness holds you now, but it holds you gently. The night embraces you, but it embraces you with safety. The ancient fear whispers, but it whispers only that you have survived, that the dawn will come, that all is well. Sleep now, human being. Sleep now, creature of the day resting in the night. Sleep now, fearful one finding peace. The darkness is complete. The night is deep. The rest is here. Tomorrow awaits, bright and full of possibility. But tomorrow is for tomorrow. Tonight is for sleep. Let the fear go. Let the tension go. Let everything go except the breath, the heartbeat, the slow drift into dreams. You are safe. You are loved. You are home. The darkness cannot hurt you. The night cannot harm you. The fear is only an echo, and echoes fade. Sleep well, dear listener. Sleep well, fellow human. Sleep well, descendant of all who faced the darkness and lived to see the dawn. The night is yours now. Rest in it. Trust it. Let it carry you to morning. Good night. The silence of the night settles around you like a blanket. The darkness wraps you in its ancient embrace. The fear, that old companion, finally rests. For millions of years, your ancestors kept watch in the darkness, alert for danger, tense with fear. Tonight, you can let that watch end. Tonight, you can let the vigilance fade. Tonight, You can trust the darkness to hold you safe until morning. This is the peace they earned for you. This is the gift of all those nights survived. This is what it means to be human in a world where the night has been tamed. Rest now, dream now, sleep now. The morning will come, as it always has, as it always will. Until then, let the darkness be your friend. Good night, child of the survivors. Good night, heir of the fearful ones. Good night.